So welcome to our webinar this evening, our Return to Rugby webinar, which is going to focus on gym and indoor physical activity reopening and resuming. We've got myself, Jennifer Griffin, Regional Director for Glasgow South. We're fortunate enough to have Graham Finney from Sport Scotland's facility team here to help us this evening. So we're hoping to be about 45 minutes on this. We will be recording the webinar as usual, and we will upload it onto the channel hopefully by the end of the week, if not the beginning of next week. So if there's anything else that if you miss anything or you want to go over anything. The agenda for this evening will be, there's some information from Graham specifically from Sport Scotland around the process of return to facilities and return to sport. We'll then go through gym reopening and then look at indoor physical activity. Then have a bit of a look at multi-use facility guidance. So now that we have pitches open and indoor areas open, what's the best way to manage that? And then we've got a wee bit of further guidance just to wrap up at the end. As always, you've got the Q&A function. If you've got any questions at all, just pop them into that. We will try and respond to them as we go. If we don't worry about it. We will complete an FAQ document and we'll get that out next week. So I'm just going to hand over to Graham for this piece.
Thanks, Jen. Just make sure I unmute myself. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to Scottish Rugby and Jen for the opportunity to update you guys on the changes to indoor sport. The last time we spoke, we were in the midst of preparing our Getting Your Facilities Fit for Sport, and the slide you're seeing at the moment is the 4 phases of that document, the guidance. Unfortunately, the Scottish Government have also adopted those same 4 phases. So if you're looking at the Scottish Government guidance, it does reflect how Scottish Sport Scotland have tried to help produce guidance to make it easier for clubs and community groups to open indoor facilities safely. So within those 4 phases, it's plan, prepare, protect and review, and that's where we need to make sure that we're going through all the phases so that we can move forward smoothly. And if we do unfortunately have a local lockdown like Aberdeen, take a step back, learn some lessons and move forward again. In the planning phase, most of you will have had your outdoor facilities open, so it's back to the responsibility of management to look at what's been happening, review and update any operating policies. Now that might make it more complicated where you've got hospitality facilities, indoor gyms and things like that, or if you're a multi-sport facility, you need to make sure that all those operating policies are in line with Scottish Government guidelines and things like that. Connecting with your network, obviously you guys are connected with Scottish Rugby, that's excellent. You may want to look at reconnecting with your local authority or the trusts to see what facilities you'll be accessing for them and how that works with you guys as clubs to deliver for your members and players. Obviously the current requirements still are just outdoor pitches, but as we move forward to the 31st of August we can access indoors, so it's those future requirements. But it would also be good to plan a little bit further ahead for the requirements in the future phases as well. The reinstatement plans you would hopefully had in place when you were opening up pitches and toilets, they need to be updated now to include any other indoor areas that you're going to open up in line with Scottish Government guidelines. So it's worth looking at all these things and seeing how you're going to do that as a management team. The differences now will be programming will change. The physical distancing requirements will change. We need to make sure that we're looking how, when we're accessing indoor facilities, we can minimise any crossovers, dwell times between groups. And as I said, if you have got your hospitality facilities open, your pitches open, and you've got lots of activity going on at the same time, all of those have to be looked at as a whole programme and not just in isolation for individual elements, pitches or change, as we'll come to gyms. One thing that is essential and mandatory is recording participant attendance. You're already doing that on your pitches, but you also have to do it indoors. and that's to support the NHS track and trace. It's vitally important, as has been seen by the local lockdown in Aberdeen, about tracking people and tracing people. And in that instance, the virus spread as far as Orkney, we believe, via somebody who sailed out of Peterhead. And inclusion, there is an obligation on everybody to make sure that our facilities are as inclusive as possible, and not just looking at the able-bodied members of our clubs. So we have to ensure that those things are taken care of when we're planning to open facilities, and make sure that everything is taken care of in that regard. Now that we're able to open up more of our indoor facilities, hopefully you'll all manage to do condition surveys, rectify all the things that have possibly gone wrong during lockdown. I don't think anybody expected us to have facilities closed for that long. But as we move into the building and everything is now in a condition that we can use, we need to start thinking about those physical distancing rules. We need to enhance the health and hygiene, the health and safety. All the risk assessments need to be reviewed on the basis of more people entering the building, and the cleaning regimes need to be updated to reflect the potential increased usage of the building. Those high traffic areas may have to be cleaned more often than they were previously if it was just toilets. So all of those things have to be looked at. And communicating all this to members is very important. We need to make sure that members are aware of any changes that have happened due to the relaxing of lockdown measures as we move into new areas of buildings. That can, and we have seen some very good examples through Scottish Rugby of clubs filming one-way systems, filming cleaning procedures that have taken place to increase the confidence of parents and families who are going to be in your facility. So that communication with members is crucial. And the new things to be aware of in the guidance, and the new things to be aware of from the Scottish Government guidelines, is the ventilation in terms of utilising those activity spaces. The ventilation, whether it's natural or mechanical, has to be, where possible, 100% natural. So that means not having any recycled air. So if you do have a facility that's got air handling units, you need to switch it to fully flow from outside air and not recycling. You have to make sure that the facilities are ramped up to 20 litres per second if possible. If that can't be achieved, most systems are designed to 10 litres per second. So that will allow you to work out the capacities based on physical distancing, and then 9 metres square per person, which is in all of our guidelines. Once you've got that idea of, and you know what your ventilation is, if it's natural ventilation, there's really good guidance within Sport Scotland documents. We have worked really intensely through the CIBSE guidance, who are the people who advise, the consultants who advise on mechanical and electrical services, as well as natural ventilation. And we've got some good advice in there as well on the use of CO2 monitors in activity spaces. So once you've done all that, look to your ventilation and activity spaces, it's worth looking at what areas might not be open as well, and clearly identifying those as restricted areas, but also identifying those areas that are open clearly, so there's no confusion with members when they are accessing areas that haven't been open previously. And again, it's managing that physical distancing, making sure there's no overcrowding between sessions, between different areas of the building, and as well as externally. We talked previously about that journey from roadside to pitch side. This now includes roadside to the indoors as well as your hospitality. So we need to make sure that we're maximising the flow of people to keep people moving, and minimising dwell times and the potential for crossovers. Because the last thing you want is people standing having a conversation, which could put other people at risk, not just the people who are standing having a conversation. And managing the activity in the building is something that needs to be looked at carefully as well. Making sure that people are aware of the set times they have, so they're not hanging about talking to their friends after or looking to have a double session. We have to make sure that is very clear in our programming across all of the sessions that are happening, whether it's indoors or outdoors.
Okay, so if we move on to some indoor gym opening guidance, we have an infographic which will be uploaded onto the website tomorrow on some basically key tips for operations. So as we know, we spoke before, every time we discuss the facilities or any sort of activity, should be a risk assessment carried out and undertaken by the club and signed by committee and COVID safety coordinator. Individuals should train alone within their own capabilities, so therefore no spotting and support in terms of coaching. However, there should never be only one person in the gym at any one time. There should always be more than one for safety reasons, but it's just to allow people to train within their own capabilities without the need for spotters and therefore not intruding on that physical distancing. Where possible, outdoor is best. So if you can take equipment outside safely, if it's safe to do so and you have the space to take it out onto the grass, as long as you clean it before and after, then feel free to do so. Ventilation, Graham covered a bit of that there. We're actually going to go into a wee bit more depth in a second, just on what that means. But as Graham said, fresh air where possible. So looking to open all windows and doors where is practically possible. We spoke about that physical distancing and people working within their own individual space. That gives you a bit of an indication there. And we're also looking at one-way systems around the gym if that is something that can be helped. So we've also got some guidance from Scottish Government and Sport Scotland guidance that is in this document. As I said, this will be posted tomorrow. So the purposes of tonight's webinar is to talk about the physical prep for rugby, and that's what this advice and guidance will be based on. If your club has a gym that you offer membership to the public, then you should follow the Sport Scotland and Scottish Government guidance, which is outlined there. Okay. If clubs choose to open indoor gyms, the following should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, so the adequate space to allow for physical distancing. The recommendation is 9 metres squared per person. If you put 2 people at 9 metres squared together, that allows you to maintain 2 metres. If you've got fixed equipment in your gym, that's much easier to manage. You can tape off or mark off the area around that so that people can move around those pieces of equipment safely. You need to consider when you're marking things out, circulation routes, allowing people to move around, maintaining physical distancing as well. If you're going to be doing anything that's more active, that 9 metres squared will probably have to increase, so that if somebody's moving about the gym at the same time as people are taking part in more active conditioning, then you need to give them more space. We've got some diagrams later on that will show that, but it is just to make sure that there's no risk of transmission through aerosols or potentially accidental contact. So the adequate space is really down to maintaining physical distancing of 2 metres. And the adequate ventilation, knowing some of the facilities that I've worked on with clubs in Scottish Rugby through Cashback or Club Sustainability Fund, there's a wide variety of different types of gyms, whether it's converted squash courts at Mar and Ayr, or the purpose-built shed at Stirling, and the upgrade of Howe of Fife. All of them are different. All of them are going to have to be assessed individually and risk assessments done individually. Squash courts traditionally don't have windows. They have one door in, and if there is any sort of ventilation, it's likely to be quite low. So the clubs who have got something like that are going to have to figure out how to get additional ventilation in, and if there's dead space or potentially static and stagnant air pockets in there, you might need to introduce fans to get that air moving. Where you've got windows or any openings, they should be opened 15 minutes prior to activity starting. And in the Sport Scotland guidelines, we've got some information on some of the things that you need to consider. If you've got a single-sided ventilation, if the depth of the room is less than twice the height, then you have to consider definitely introducing mechanical ventilation, some sort of mechanical airflow to keep things moving. It's just to reduce the risk of transmission through aerosols, through people breathing heavily. So that adequate ventilation, and when you've got windows and doors, if you can open them, Obviously, that's great. If you've got 2 or 3 sides to a room, that's even better because it allows cross ventilation. But if the openings are quite small and you do feel that the air isn't moving, please introduce fans. We had a webinar this morning, hi Hazel, where we were asked about introducing fans, and somebody was asking about that risk of pushing the aerosols from somebody on a treadmill into other users. If you are going to do it, try and think about the location of those fans and putting them behind the people who are taking part in the activity, so that any aerosols are blown onto the back of the person in front of them potentially, so that it's not a face-to-face, if you like. So it's worth considering that when you're doing your risk assessment on how you introduce fans if you need them. Where you have mechanical ventilation, it tends to be designed at 10 litres per second per person. So by halving the capacity or reducing the capacity, it can quite easily get to 20 litres per second. And that tends to be based on the 9 metres squared per person. The other thing that people keep talking about is, oh, it's a big shed, there's lots of air movement. It tends to happen in big sheds. If there's no air movement at a higher level, it becomes stagnant air. Even in houses, you find pockets of air that don't move, and by having mechanical ventilation, that allows that to move more freely. So if you don't have mechanical ventilation in a big shed, don't think you're okay, because if the air doesn't move, you're at as much risk as you are in a small space. So adequate ventilation is crucial to allowing indoor gyms to open up.
Thanks, Graham. So, as we've said before, a risk assessment must be undertaken. And now that we're starting to open up different areas of the club, this risk assessment shouldn't be undertaken in isolation and just around the gym. It should be undertaken with everything in context of pitches, any hospitality that may be going on, and traffic areas in and out of this. So this risk assessment may in fact alter all the other ones that are there, so it's just to make sure all those systems marry up and everything is updated where possible. Intense cleaning practices before, during and after sessions, it's mandatory that happens, and if possible looking to have a cleaning sheet to log all of that to make sure that anyone who's responsible for that, whether it be a coach taking the session or someone else nominated within the club, that there is responsibility for that and keeping that updated to ensure that all the guidelines are being followed. And then finally, the check-in and check-out process to assist contact tracing is mandatory. I know some clubs are using online booking systems, some are using Eventbrite, some are using apps. Doesn't matter what you use, as long as it's working for you and that it's used during every session, before, during and after. So just to kind of reiterate, where safe and possible to do so, outdoor gym activity is advised. If you can get the equipment outside, clean it, use it, and then take it back in and clean it again, only if the surface is safe. And again, you would need to carry out a risk assessment to do so. What resources we have available for you is we've got a return to rugby gym reopening guidance. It's got some key points for before, during, after a session, for operations of sessions, and also for coaching gym sessions and some guidelines around that. And we've also got the Sports Scotland facilities document that I was talking about earlier, that you should refer to whether you do or don't have public membership is good practice guidance, and everything that we have has been derived from that. So that is there and available to download as a PDF. So moving on to indoor sport and physical activity. This is not just chatting around facilities like you can see on the screen. This is also talking about if your club uses the indoor facility to let out to fitness classes, yoga instructors, any third-party organisation, or whether you use it yourself for fitness. So we'll give a couple of examples as we go around, but that's what we're talking about when we cover indoor physical activity and sport. So as of the 31st of October, indoor areas can open for everyone. For adults and children over 12, it is non-contact sport and physical activity only. And for those children who are under 12, it's contact and non-contact. When we talk about rugby, We mean the sanctioned version of touch that was approved by Scottish Government to adhere to all the guidelines. But that is the current guidance that we are looking at just now. Before you consider opening any indoor space, have a think about staggering the activities to allow that adequate cleaning and the fresh air flow that Graham spoke about previously. I don't know if you want to elaborate a wee bit on that, Graham.
Yeah, we had some questions this morning again on another webinar about that, and you know, the recommendation is 20 minutes between sessions, so you adequate cleaning, allow people to leave and arrive safely. It also falls in line with the SIBSE guidance about the 15 minutes to allow fresh air flow into that space as well. So whilst we've talked about the 15 minutes before any session, if you're allowing minimum 15 minutes, it just allows more fresh air back in to remove any aerosols that may be in place. And staggering activities, obviously, that helps with the flow of people around the facility and that journey to and from the building or pitches.
Again, we're looking at the risk assessment to be undertaken, and that again is not in isolation. It's encompassing everything that's going on at the club, and bearing in mind that those amendments may have to be made. Also, that consideration, if you do have external operators that use the facility, they should undertake their own risk assessment as well as see and sign the club's risk assessment. Okay, it's really important that they have eyes on what you deem as being safe, and you have the same for them and their activity. So on that, Graham's going to just talk through some ideas around spacing.
Yeah, so the diagram on the right is the 9 metre square per person. And when you think about how that works for an activity space, you can see how many people that accommodates. As I said earlier, if you're looking at something that's more active, people moving around quite quickly, trying to increase that space so that there's less chance of that 2 metre square being 2 metre distance and being encroached on. This is what it would look like on the left, where you've got 12 to 16, 18 square metres or 20 square metres per person, depending on the activity. And if you are looking at opening your indoor spaces, and even when you look at that, the picture that was on the slide introducing this, that indoor hall at Linlithgow, I think it is, you're probably going to think that this is overly onerous, but that hall doesn't look or appear to have any mechanical ventilation. The doors that are in the external walls are fire doors, so they should remain closed. So the club there are going to have to figure out what that physical distancing is going to look like to allow the actual starting capacity, and then managing what the capacity is going to be thereafter for the activity that takes place. Once you've calculated the capacity of the facility, it's probably worth noting that everybody breathes the same air. So whilst those children under 12 don't have to maintain physical distancing, the calculations are irrespective of age. So whilst we're looking at this, 3 metre square per person is fine for your young people taking part in activities indoors. But as we move to the over 12s and adults, the diagram on the left is something that will have to be more considered more often. If you've got external users who are come under the guidance of other governing bodies, they have recommendations on the numbers allowed, and that can be worked out on the size of a space. For example, netball talk about having 50 people as a capacity in a 4-badminton court hall, but their recommendation is keeping that to a maximum of 30, so that they're actually minimising the risk of transmission through contact in the modified game they have, as well as through the transmission of aerosols within the modified game that they've got going on at the moment. So these are the types of considerations that other sports have got. So if you do have external users, make sure that they've referred to their governing body if they have one. And if they don't, then you revert back to Sport Scotland and Scottish Government guidelines on physical distancing and the activity that's taking place. So hopefully these diagrams help. There are other ones that cover things like yoga. So if you put yoga mat down, actually you need a further metre so that you maintain that physical distancing all round. And I'm aware that clubs do many different activities, many different community groups come in. So all of those are going to have to figure out and really look into what it takes to move into the buildings that you have. That was something that we encountered this morning as well, is with those the cleaning needing to be done, it is floors as well. And one thing we've learnt from some of the local authorities is that whilst you may have a bookable session of an hour, you either add on 15 to 20 minutes at the end, or you reduce the session length and put that cleaning and transition phase within that hour, so that you're maintaining the same number of bookings, but you reduce the time they have so that everybody's safe within the building. And it's not just the people who are in at that point, it's the next group and the group after. So all of these points are really crucial for making sure that your facilities are safe for all the users you have.
Okay, thanks, Victor. So changing facilities, this is something that has come up in the past couple of weeks from clubs, and we know you're really anxious and wanting to get more information around changing facilities. Our guidance is that where possible, participants should arrive already changed for activity and leave without showering. Changing rooms are an area of increased risk of transmission and should remain closed for now, other than for those with disabilities, additional needs or in exceptional circumstances. If clubs require to open changing facilities, they should adhere to the following guidance, and Graham will just talk us through some of that.
Yeah, so having been in quite a lot of club facilities, especially rugby over my time, most of them are one door in, one door out. So that instantly brings in an issue of how you get people in and out safely, maintaining physical distancing. You can't leave the door open. That leads to privacy and potentially child protection issues if you're bringing kids in. Most changing rooms are based on a 450 to 500 per person on that bench. So if you take a standard changing room with 15 to 20 people, if you have to maintain 2 meters physical distancing in there, you reduce the capacity significantly. If you're thinking about introducing screens, again, the space has to be larger than that single seat size, because you're going to have bags and all their clothes within the screens, but also that so that you can maintain that physical distancing and not have any equipment touching, potentially having cross-contamination of the virus. But you also have to make sure that when people are moving around within that change room, they're maintaining physical distancing, and that can be quite challenging. Most clubs probably still have got open communal showers. Again, that's a big challenge. When you're showering, you're creating aerosols by the water splashing off bodies. So any communal showers, it would have to be one person at a time, and they would have to be cleaned in between each person using them. And that's floors, walls, and all the shower heads and all the fittings. So you can see how that would have an impact on the usage of showering facilities at the moment and changing rooms. So all of those minor things would cause once you build them up into that whole picture, it is quite a significant challenge for clubs to use changing facilities right now. Toilets would have to be cleaned after each person used it. You also have to consider cleaning down the whole changing room after each group. How long that takes depends on the size of the changing room, the number of people who've been in, and the number of touch points. So that's really how challenging it will be and how difficult it will be at this current point for people to open changing rooms, which is why the recommendation is to keep them closed. As we move forward and lockdown restrictions ease further, hopefully, that will change. Physical distancing may come down, there may be other mitigating measures in place, but we don't know what they are yet. So at the moment, this is what you'd have to do, and that's why we're recommending don't use changing rooms and showers on site.
Perfect. And we do have some resources to accompany this information. So we have guidance on using indoor space for physical activity and sport. So before things to consider before any sessions, and then just general use for guidance. There's also some information there that again directs you to the Sport Scotland and Scottish Government website. So feel free to have a look at them. They are available for everyone to use how you see fit. So just moving on to multi-use facilities as well, we are aware, and I kind of alluded to at the start, there is more opening now, there's more chance for activity. So we just wanted to give some really clear guidance on how to manage that. Staggering times, so avoiding times where indoor and outdoor training and hospitality take place, allowing 30 minutes in between indoor and outdoor activities. So like Graham was saying, you know, if you've got someone who does rent out your indoor space, make sure you've got 30 minutes in between them being in and someone else coming in, whether it be a club activity or not. that space is really required, one, to avoid congestion, adequate time for cleaning, but again, just allow that fresh air to flow all the way through the facility. High standards of cleaning should be maintained throughout the facility, and especially in the toilets, which Graham alluded to as well, and those high traffic areas. So if you do have a one-way system and you do have your staggered timetable, you'll very quickly see those areas and touch points where there will be high traffic areas. So it's just about concentrating in that high intensity and frequency of cleaning at that. Check-in, check-out process to assist with track and trace. We all know now that that is absolutely mandatory and what we have to do. One-way systems, as we discussed, and in all honesty, just keep it simple. The easier it is, the easier it then is for everyone to follow. And if we can keep it the same for each day and each user that comes in, it just avoids that confusion. And again, this information will be available on the website. So just over to Graham.
Yeah, the protect phase in the plan is about when you've got your participants in the building and in the facility. We're going to emphasise the point again is maintaining that record of users, making sure your cleaning plans are visible. That's something that's worked really well down in England. They've been open for a few weeks longer than we have. Publicising, making it very obvious rather than hiding it on the back of a door. Show that you've got the cleaning done, it's been checked, and not just a paper exercise. The hygiene measures, making sure hand hygiene is adhered to at all times. I've said in the past, one of the things we talked to Sport New Zealand about, their biggest concern at the point of them coming out lockdown was complacency. So make sure your members are self-policing, make sure that they're enforcing their own club members, teammates, and even the coaches. Coaches can forget as well. So make sure that everybody's got a culture of self-policing to make sure that nobody makes a mistake. And looking at all these things and the physical distancing measures when we're actually in the buildings, make sure people are maintaining those as well. You see yourselves in supermarkets how easily it is for people to just have a slip and get too close. The last thing we want to do is have an outbreak within a club facility because somebody made a mistake. Just self-policing is what we're thinking about. And again, communicating everything to participants is something that's crucial in all the plans. If anything changes, update them as soon as you can. If there's changes to one-way systems, changes to cleaning regimes, publicise it, give them confidence that you are moving and changing as things change with the easing of lockdown measures. And the review, it's very simple. As things keep changing, update your operating policies, risk assessments. As I said earlier, the lockdown in Aberdeen, if that happens to you in your area, it might not be you that's caused it, but if you've gone through the correct steps and stages, you've got all the risk assessments and you've kept all your records, it should be quite simple to move back. Learn some lessons from that, review what you've done, and then as the lockdown restrictions ease, move forward with a bit more simplicity about things, and with the lessons learned, your members should be more comfortable coming back as well. Making sure as we continue with the easing of lockdown, you keep up to date with Scottish Rugby's return to sport plans. They are very well considered, having been in meetings with Jen and the rest of the guys. There's a lot of thinking going through these things, so it isn't just as the government make announcements, they fire something together. There's a lot of planning going on. And the last thing in the review, as you're moving out of these lockdown stages, is long-term planning. With the changes in the upgrade of ventilation or whatever you've looked at as you open your facility for yourself, your members, and potentially other users, how can you maintain that? How can you improve that beyond COVID? There's lots of clubs saying they get new members. Can you retain those and keep getting new ones in? Or is this just a COVID spike? Let's plan a little bit longer term and see how we can sustain our clubs and our sport for longer.
Perfect. So for further information and guidance, we've got the Scottish Rugby website, which you'll all be aware of, all the resources that we talked about tonight. So the gym infographic, the guidance on reopening the gym and user guidance on that. guidance for indoor physical activity, along with the multi-use facility guidance. That will all be available on the website tomorrow. We do have the Sport Scotland website as well, which we've referred to multiple times tonight. And as I said before, that is where we derive a lot of our guidance from, and we just rugbify it and give it specific and bespoke examples to what is happening in our game and our sport and our prep for that. Just looking further into the future, it's not to be considered just now, but it was just for information that's coming further down the line. When we do get to the point that we have and are allowed to have spectators at clubs, again, looking at this, the sort of longer term and match day and what is the new normal is the term everyone keeps using. Certainly from a Scottish Rugby point of view, we will provide some match day guidance. It will be operational before, during, after, things for clubs to think about. For now, it would seem that irregardless of facility, whether you have fixed stadia or not, that all football and rugby clubs will be classed and should adhere to any guidelines that come out under stadia. We will confirm this once we get more information from Scottish Government, but it certainly looks that way just now. So Graham's just going to chat about some guidance that is there to have a look at briefly, but not to worry too much about it just now. We will absolutely help you as we get those announcements.
Yeah, this is a look forward. It's not anything that we can action right now, but the Green Guide, as it's commonly known because it's a big green book, when you're designing sports stadia or looking to get licences for sports stadia, the Guide to Safety at Sports Ground is the government guidance on spectating, and the link that is there shows the diagrams that they've produced and have been signed off by UK government, which is adopted across the UK, not just in England, on how to manage and maintain social distancing, physical distancing within a stadia, but also within spectator areas. At the moment, it's looking at it at 1 metre, but they also have a note at the bottom talking about 2 metres potentially for physical distancing. So if you have got a stand or a seating area, please have a look at that now so you can plan ahead and prepare. But also if you have got, when we do start to get matches played, you do need to make sure that you've got all these things considered. Even the kind of standard rails around a pitch, that's a touch point. It needs to be cleaned and marked out of bounds so people don't lean on it. That's something that's probably one of the first things you have to do. So it's a look forward. It's a look ahead to see what might happen, depending on what happens with the lockdown measures, physical distancing measures. That's a good starting point for you.
As Graham said, it's a bit further down the line, but it's just something I know we have been getting questions about that, and it's just a bit of food for thought really on that. Finally, just want to say thanks for everyone for taking the time to attend this evening. I appreciate it's a lot of information. As I said, we are recording this and we will upload it. And the questions that we have, myself and Graham will do as best as we can to make sure we can get those answered by the end of the week, if possible. This advice and guidance that we're giving tonight is valid as of today. As we all know, things can change daily and sometimes hourly. So if things do change tomorrow, we will amend and change the guidance to reflect that. But for now, it looks like we're going with the guidance that we have. So as I said, it will all be available on the website tomorrow, and we'll get this webinar uploaded as soon as possible. So just a huge thanks from myself and Graham, and a thanks from me to Graham for taking the time to help us tonight. This is webinar number, what of the week, Graham?
2 this week. It's about 34 since we started this with you guys in May, Jen.
Yeah. So thanks very much for your time on it, and thanks to everyone. If you've got any further questions, please do not hesitate to email in to our rugby development admin inbox, or just use a link on the website. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you.